You're listening to the Sanditon Chronicles, where we talk all things Sanditon and Sanditon adjacent. Come along with us as we dissect all of your favorite characters, scenes, and dialogue. We have so much to tell you. Hey guys, welcome back to the Sanditon Chronicles. I'm Maureen.
I'm Janice.
And today we are back with our promised discussion on Lennox. Now we had thought we had gone through all the characters, and we didn't forget about Lennox because he's not good, because I think Tom Wilson-Jones plays the part excellent. And he plays it confusingly like he's supposed to. He plays it where you don't really know what's coming out of it. So it's not because we didn't like his character, but it's, we were focused on other characters who didn't end up to be bad at the end. And so we're going to dig into Lennox a little bit today. Now, what was your first impression of Lennox when you saw him on the screen?
Well, I never quite trust some of these military men. So, I thought at first maybe he would be a little pompous, and especially the first time we see him is when they're riding, he's on a white horse, did you notice that?
Yes.
Into Sanditon, and
the gallant, brave,
misdirection.
Noble.
And and then the second time we see him, when we meet him actually, is when the girls go into the camp and he comes out of his tent shirtless, and then puts his shirt on. Part. So yeah.
It just seems so
it's
frivolous.
Funny that and it's interesting that they decided to do it that way, but whatever, And then really when we really have more of a conversation, to see him have more of a conversation, is when he goes to check on the child that had been injured during the parade. So he goes to Trafalgar House.
Now, I don't think I think he used that as a ruse. I think he was like, I want to see more about this lady. I don't really care about children at all.
Well, and ironic to think that it turns out to be his own daughter, but of course, how would he know it was a girl at that point, or that it was his daughter? And it's I think it was a convenient excuse, but he did the responsible thing as the commander of the unit. He should have checked on it, checked on the child, and he knew that who they were, so he knew Tom was, he knew, so he knew to go there and find out.
Yeah.
But the whole banter back and forth between him and really
Allison,
not Charlotte, but Allison. Yeah. Allison was so obvious. It was crazy. And of course, Charlotte was not ready for that at all.
No.
Her head was completely in another spot. So,
and I think it's interesting that Lennox was piqued by Charlotte's appearance, because Rose Williams is stunning,
beautiful,
and Charlotte's beautiful. So that seems natural and commonplace, but it almost seemed like Allison pushing for Charlotte made him more attracted to Charlotte, almost like, oh, she's too shy to say it to myself, say it to me directly, so she must be this great candidate. Charlotte did speak up, but she wasn't the one pushing for the relationship the way Allison was doing. So I think that even endeared her to him a little bit more, that someone else had to speak of her affections in a roundabout way.
Yeah, maybe, but obviously we know that Allison tells us very clearly right then, Allison's there to catch a husband, and so she wants Charlotte to have one.
Yeah.
And since he's showing interest in Charlotte, she's going to promote it. And it's her way of finding out if he was married. And so it became obvious to him, that Charlotte wasn't married,
Yeah.
So it was available, as it were.
But the way that Allison kind of promoted Charlotte to him, it was clear that Allison wasn't going after Lennox. That everything she was saying was to boost Charlotte.
Yeah. Right.
And I think Charlotte, the fact that Charlotte had someone advocating for her instead of Charlotte advocating for himself, I think that appealed to him a little bit.
Yeah, everything about that appealed to him, but not to Charlotte.
Poor Charlotte. And she left there so upset. I was legitimately upset with Allison in that scene.
Oh yeah. Yeah. She's just being, you know, so forthright and so pushy, just pushy. And yeah, it's it was not Allison's best moment. So he obviously shows interest in her and, says glowing things about Charlotte, quick thinking, and all that for taking care of the child. And then Charlotte leaves. And so she apologizes when they see each other next for just leaving, And of course, Tom and his stupidity is like, why did she behave like that? Well, get a clue, Tom.
I really
It
wish
has
that
to be
Tom didn't have
explained
to
to
be
him.
told.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, Mary obviously thought so too. When she finally had to, did you not put it together?
She was so hopeful that Tom would figure it out.
Yeah, she probably really thought he had, but it became obvious he had not, that he had no clue.
Yeah.
Which is amazingly unobservant.
And that's one thing you cannot say about Lennox, because as a military man, he is very observant, and he can sense things in other people, because that's what he does. He's a strategist. That's what he does for a living. He's done it his probably most of it. I mean, we're not given how old Lennox is, but I get the feeling he's a little bit older than even Colburn, and maybe around Tom's age. Did you get that feeling?
No, I
Not
think
quite
he's
Tom's
in
age?
between. No, I don't think he's quite Tom's age, but he's probably close to Sydney's age.
The ranking that he's at, you have to be in the military for a while, or at least buy your commission up.
Right. But also the fact that he had field experience, he actually was in war, that advances you much quicker.
That's true.
Than if you weren't, if it was non-war time. You can get field commissions that increase your ranking.
That's true.
So I don't think he's as old as Tom, but I think he was probably as old as Sydney was, and maybe I don't know exactly where Edward fits into that, but pretty close to those ages.
Yeah. It's hard because they all are in such different standings in their life that it's hard to pinpoint where they're at, because there's so many different factors that could have elevated them to where they're at or lowered them to where they're at. So I kind of like that mystery, but it would be nice for these kind of discussions to know exactly how old people are. But
yeah.
And my point in saying all that was just to say that he has done this kind of work for his entire adult life. And likely into his teens, he's probably done this work. So he knows when to pick up on people's weaknesses as well as their strengths. And I think, we certainly saw that with Colburn, how he noticed right away the small interest Colburn had. And I even think that made Charlotte more appealing to Lennox when he saw that Colburn was attracted to her and wanted something to do with her. I think even that he's like, okay, I spy a challenge here. Let's get into this. I mean,
not to mention that
attracted to her.
And not to mention that it just gave him an opportunity to rib Colburn.
Exactly.
To make him, to have a dig at Colburn. But he is an interesting character, and you don't know at first that he's really a bad guy or mostly a bad guy. But you do by the time of the meal, when he takes Tom aside to gamble. You kind of get a real hint then of what his true character is. He's grooming him for the time when he's going to help him lose money, and then be beholding to Lennox, which of course is really after the balloon, when Lennox shows up and offers the use of the balloon to try and make the fair more successful. And so I will say one of the best times he shows up is when he and Charlotte are in the balloon, and before he starts degrading, which is actually when they get out of the balloon, Colburn. But when they're in the balloon and he admits that he's not fond of heights, lofty views, and you know, he's pretty sweet to her at that point. That's probably one of the best. And I will say this, at the uh, dinner, then when they're dancing,
Mm-hmm.
he's very nice to her.
Yeah.
And I really do like the fact that he gives her a strategy of how to deal with the Augusta, you
Mm-hmm.
know. I mean, he really does. And that's really good banter
Yeah,
between the two of them.
I
He
agree with
doesn't
that.
really, I mean, you get the hint that he's a bad guy because what he does to Tom, takes Tom in to gamble,
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that they're doing gambling, you know,
Yeah.
but
It was the
you don't
way
really
he
see.
maneuvered Tom in there. And it was the way that, and like we pointed out, he's a strategist and he knows people's weaknesses and strengths. So we knew at this point when Tom was visibly distressed at the idea of gambling and Colonel Lennox still pushed for it, you know that Colonel Lennox also saw that he did not want to do this, but Colonel Lennox
Right,
cornered him into doing it, knowing that.
he
So
did.
that
Well,
it was
he
that
gave
approach
him
that made me like,
and that he staked him. So
mhm.
then that took away Tom's excuse not to gamble.
Yeah.
And then the die was cast, as it were, with that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's it's interesting, and it's really, it's in um the first episode that we find out that Edward still owes money for his commission,
Yeah.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So he's taken him on without getting paid.
And
So interesting.
I think because, and I think Edward had something to offer by, suggesting Sanson, suggesting the things that the way they can make money there. And I'm sure that Edward gave them inside information on, these are the people who are in charge. These are the people you want to connect with. And that's a good, and if Lennox does this and every town he goes to, or takes the people who are head of the town and convinces them to spend money or lose money to him, I mean, that's a great scheme that he's got going on.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
think
that's
Edward
right.
had something to offer, and that's probably why he allowed him to join Willow Commission. And also the promise of, my aunt lives there, I get money from her. If we go here, I will have money for my commissions. There's that aspect of he wasn't just being generous, and he wasn't being I can't think of the word. I just blanked on the word, but he wasn't doing it out of the kindness of his heart. He was doing it because there was a promise of payment in one way or another. There was a promise of payment for him in that town.
Right.
And I think, again, as we know him as a strategist, and as the downfall of that personality is that he's very, very self-serving. So even with Charlotte, like in the balloon, there was a strategy there. He was very kind to her, but I don't think Lennox is evil. I think he's incredibly selfish, and he isn't aware of what other people around him, or he is aware, but he doesn't care what other people around him, what they want, because he's so self-serving. It's, well, I want this, so we're going to work to what I need and what I want. And you could see that with Colburn. It was, I don't like him, so we're going to punish him, and everyone else should punish him too. And on the balloon with Charlotte, we see that on the balcony in the final ball, where he says everything that he wants from her, and then he gets mad when she says no. Everything he's done with her, all those sweet moments, they're contrived. I feel like I feel like he was being kind, but part of a strategy, not part of who he actually was.
Well, he says at that moment, quit playing games. Well, obviously, he's been playing games, and she has not.
Yeah.
At no point has she been playing games.
She's
just been nice to him, basically.
Yeah.
And but what we don't get, and we don't get that we do get with some of the other characters who misbehave, is any background about how he got to be like he is. We just know that he's not always a good person. I mean, he can act in good ways, but as you said, he has a hidden agenda.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think, like, with Clara, we are giving a little bit of background about, her uncle and all that stuff, but we know that she is the way she is because she has to survive. And I think we see Lennox, and we don't have, so maybe that is why he started that way. Maybe he was a second son, or maybe he was to a really poor family and he had to work his way through the ranks just to make money to actually live and be something. We don't know the reason for that. However, I think the difference between Clara, who is largely self-serving out of necessity, and him being largely self-serving, he seems very confident and comfortable being self-serving. Like he's just, no, I deserve this. This is right for me. And whereas you look at Clara, who's the same sort of self-serving attitude, hers is, I always have to have a backup plan. I always have to have some way to get ahead. I have to. And his is just, no, I deserve this.
She comes from a position of no power. He comes from a position of power, but that requires responsibility.
Yeah.
So he's responsible for all those soldiers and seeing that they are provided for. So it's not entirely selfish because he has others to care for, which is one of the things that's interesting about what he says to Charlotte about that he's taken the liberty of finding a home, right? An estate or whatever, I forget what he calls it. But because he wants to, he must be envisioning that this would be his home base. He would marry her and then he'd go off to do whatever he has to do at war, But if that was the case, he would make a bigger effort to see if he was really sincere, he'd make a bigger effort to take care of the shopkeepers and, all of that, which he obviously doesn't. There's so much corruption, in that kind of system where you give a commission to somebody with when they pay you and where you're responsible for everything, but then you control it all. There's just so much corruption. We have just been watching the series Turn, which is about an actual spy ring in the American Revolution. Yeah, it's really interesting.
Right.
And
where is it on?
It's so obvious that I'm sorry.
Where do you watch it?
On AMC Plus.
Okay.
And the thing about it is it really comes out there because they talk about it more plainly, the corruption with the British soldiers, especially not all of them, obviously, but the commanders and how they operate, so which I think was pretty pervasive throughout the British system, and not the Americans escaped it entirely, but it's interesting, as opposed to where the government issues you a commission and the British system, and I'm sure it was true in France and everywhere else, was all about the money. Anyway, interesting. Well, before I forget to say this, I had not taken time to do any research on Tom Weston Jones. Just do some lookup. And it's interesting to learn that he was raised in Dubai with a brother and sister. His parents, he grew up in Dubai. His parents were teachers at a school there, and they were drama teachers.
Wow.
And it was, he came back to London they were British, and he came back to London to go to college, and then he went to the same drama school that Theo James did.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's kind of fascinating.
Theo and his wife, whose name's escaping me at the moment. Theo James' wife.
No, oh my gosh.
See, it's not just me.
Ruth Kearney.
Ruth. Yeah, that's where they met, was at the same drama school that Tom Weston Jones attended too.
That's so fun.
And I told you about his being in the series Copper, which is about it's not English. It's policemen in New York around the turn of the century.
Oh, I didn't know that.
The early 1900s. Yeah. So, and he's much younger. It was shot about 10 years ago. 2011, I think, is when it came out. And I don't remember what it's on, which I'd have to look it up.
I can look it up. I had this app or this website that my husband showed me. It's called Just Watch, and you can look up any TV show or movie, and it'll tell you where you can watch it for free, where you can pay for it, where you can do all this stuff.
Cool. He plays a good guy in that series.
I didn't know it was turn of the century. I knew it was because you and I talked about this before. I thought it was like a modern day British thing. I didn't know it's a British show, but an American cop.
It's an American. It takes place in New York.
But is it a British show? What, an American cop? Oh
no,
because we were talking about this, and you said I thought it was British because I thought,
Copper. But Yeah, it was, but it's called copper.
That's
But there were
funny.
so many, Irish and Scottish and British immigrants, especially in
Mhm.
the area where this story takes place, a lot
Yeah.
of Irish.
Hmm.
So
That's where my family
interesting.
came in. I think the other thing too, like with him being in the military, he does have to have a sense of caring for others. And I think what is his rank? He's Colonel Lennox, right? Colonel, he's a
Hmm.
colonel. He is a good colonel. He does well in battle, but his mentality is so much strategizing, so much strategist. It's always seeking the advantage for him. And I think he does care for his men well in battle. I don't think he does a great job outside of battle, because clearly you see how he is with Edward once he doesn't have the money, which Edward totally deserved that. I'm not making an excuse for Edward, but even with not making sure they pay their shopkeeper's bill, he didn't care about that. So he cares about them on the battlefield because that's where he knows how to fund. It's all about strategy. It's all about where can I get the advantage? And the advantage is you have more men. The advantage is your men
And
don't die.
well, also you see his strategy. I mean, with Colburn, I mean, he took every opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to try and get a dig into him
Yeah.
and I think he was being genuine when he tried to help Augusta when she fainted, that he was
Mm-hmm.
he could see she was
Instinct.
about to faint. Yeah. But then what he said to Colburn was so awful about, oh, I felt like I had Lucy back
Oh.
in my hand, you know. And then what he also said at the garden, in the garden when he um
After the
won
arrows,
and oh yeah, after the
archery.
archery, and he said to Coburn, well, that's how it goes with love and war, and I've known both and you've known neither, you know. I mean, he was just
He's so cruel to him.
nasty. Yeah, he
Those
can
are
be very charming,
mhm,
but then there's
when it
this
suits.
very ugly underbelly. Yeah, that's
He's
right.
charming when he needs to be to get the advantage, and he's nasty when he thinks that it'll give him the advantage. With Colburn, he thought if he's nasty to him, he's going to walk away and leave him his prize, and there will be no
Right.
competition. And with Charlotte, he was charming because it brought the advantage to him. So I do think he is largely self-serving, even in battle, even in military. But the advantage that you need to have in military is making sure your men survive. And so that's what makes him a good colonel, is it keeping men alive is a self-serving thing because they protect him and they win and he gets accolades and he gets all these medals and he gets to rise up the ranks. So it's all a self-serving thing. He's good at his job. I'll say that. He's an excellent
Yeah,
strategist. He knows how to win battles. He knows how to win these things, but it comes from that
but
place of
it's
self-serving, I think, in him.
so obviously the most satisfying part of the show was when Tom and Arthur went and confronted him
Mm-hmm.
and um, did a wager, which, he definitely fits into that mantra of always compete.
Yeah.
He's always competing.
He has to be the better one
And
always.
yeah, and then so they challenge him and win, which is why he treats Edward the way he does, because now he's lost and he has to take it out on somebody. And Edward is the obvious victim of that.
I think that's twofold. I think it's one, he lost to Tom, but two, he also realized that Edward had been lying to him and he was hoodwinked. So
Oh,
both
yeah,
times
yeah. And
he felt, how dare you do this to me? It was just one on top of the
right,
other.
right. And Lady D wrote him
Mm-hmm.
and told him what was really going on with Edward.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. So in the end, the truth comes out.
And I think that I don't think he is gone like it, because I don't think he's a narcissist. I think that he is sort of a born military man where everything in life is a war, everything is something to be won. And that's kind
It's
of
a
how,
game.
yeah, he had every there's an opportunity to win at every single thing he does. And because of that, every single thing needs a strategy. So he's an excellent military man. But I think he has capability to be better. And you see that in that when Colburn goes in the tent and talks to him. Or actually when
Leo.
Geez, I wanted to call her Lou. Word brain.
Well,
But when Leo goes in
Leo
there
and confronts him,
yes, and you could see that softness kind of, and he is like that with children. I mean, he doesn't get an advantage with kids. There was no one in the tent to see that. It was just him and this kid. And so I think that scene showed what he is capable of becoming, but he's not there. So you see that softness with Leo, you see that kindness with Leo, and then as he does the math, you see he's shocked. But I think there's also a little bit of fear and a little bit of awe at knowing that this is my kid. And he could have taken ownership for that. It could have been another opportunity to get one over on Colburn. Yeah, see, Lucy, this is my child with Lucy. It's not yours. He could have taken that opportunity, but he didn't. He said, no, that man is your father. I am not.
Right.
And that was the moment where I was like, okay, he is not all bad. He's just selfish, because he could have done something so cruel, which had sort of been his want with Colburn, but he chose to do something that was kind and good, not just for Colburn, but also for this girl. I don't think he was doing it for Colburn. I think he was doing it for this little girl, but still.
And I agree with you. And I don't think, I mean, I think that he also realized in those few seconds, you can see it go through his head that that's how good Tom is at portraying this character. You can see it go through his head that he's thinking, oh, I have a child. Oh, I don't. There's no way for me really to take this on. And it wouldn't be good for her, and it wouldn't be good for me. And even though it's helping Colburn out in many ways, he also is taking responsibility for the girl. So I have to lie. I have to say, no, I'm not your father. This man is your father. And I mean, that was an amazing scene. And just the look on his face, and it was something else. And of course, then he has to get a dig in at Colburn when he comes back to thank him. And, but he was right in some ways in that
he thinks he's right.
Obviously. Yeah. But I also think in some ways he was right, that Colburn married, and then he didn't want to do what his wife wanted to do. And he kept himself separated from her. I mean, it was his pride got the best of him, I think, from the story we hear about him going back to his estate and leaving her in England and not making sure she came back. Well, he did take advantage of her need for a husband, which is how she ended up pregnant.
And I think even in that story, the way I felt about it was he runs an estate, and especially if his father was as bad as we were kind of given the impression he is, he probably has a lot of work to do to make that estate what it should be. So he's not going to spend his entire season in London. And it sounds like Lucy hated everything about the country to the point where she didn't really want to be there. So she wanted to, the impression of what I created in my own head was that they probably went to London for a season, like you would as an estate owner. You'd go to London for the season and you'd come back to your estate in the off season. It sounded like she didn't want to come back, but he runs the estate and had to come back.
How, I mean, we see how he treated Charlotte, like being warm and then cold and warm. I mean, he was back and forth all the time, and he may have done that with his wife.
He could have.
His bride,
but he didn't have all that guilt and all that pent up, I killed her, when he was with his wife, though.
No, but he did say that he it took him all those months to get up to swallow his pride and go into London to find her. He left her there way too long unattended.
I agree with that.
Obviously it was not a good marriage to begin with.
No, it seems like she wanted what she wanted. He be damned.
Right, but I don't think it was all her.
No, but I think that as a wife in that time to an estate owner, you had to have a little give, and it doesn't sound like either one of them had any give, is what it sounds like.
I think they were both very immature.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with Lennox, when he was saying that stuff to Colburn, because I wish I didn't prepare enough to have the script up in front of me right now, so I don't remember that exact conversation. But when he said what he said about Lucy, he would only get that from her, of how he didn't really love her, he didn't care for her, he, you know, neglected her. He would have heard that from Lucy. He wouldn't have heard that from Colburn. He wouldn't have seen that. It sounds like it came after Colburn had left. So it's what he knew of Colburn and her relationship came from this woman. So at the very least, Lennox thinks that that is the accurate portrayal of their relationship, because he was told this from the wife.
Right. And his interpretation, he said, I was the husband, you know, I comforted her when you didn't, basically is what he says. Something I'm definitely paraphrasing.
I'm gonna pull it up because it was good. It's an episode
here
6,
I have
right?
it right here. I have it. So Colburn says, I came to thank you for sparing Leonora the truth. And Lennox says, what good would it have done? I only hope you take better care of her than you did of her mother. And Colburn says, whatever you told Miss Haywood. And Lennox he's angry. And Lennox says, I remember the state Lucy was in when I first met her, lost, abandoned. And Colburn says, I know I could have been a better husband, but I never abandoned her. It was you who preyed upon her vulnerabilities. It was you who made a victim of her. And Lennox says, all I did was offer her the comfort her husband couldn't. You know, I speak the truth. Miss Haywood is plainly in love with you. Can you trust yourself not to fail her as you failed Lucy? And Colburn says, you are not fit to speak their names, and storms out. Well, he really hit a sensitive point, because of course Colburn already feels guilty in this situation. And yeah, those words lead him to separate himself from Charlotte, because he keeps saying how, you know, you're better off not being around me, you know. So yeah, he has a lot of self-esteem issues.
And I think Lennox, at the first half of that, I think he was being true to what he really thought was happening with him and with Lucy and Colburn. I think he genuinely felt that, you know, he was not a good husband from all the things he said. It's when he starts to say, all I did was offer her the comfort that her husband did. When he starts to say that stuff, I mean, you slept with a married woman. That's not all you offered her. You did way beyond that. And I think so he starts off being honest and truthful, and it's almost like he catches himself, and so he slowly goes into a dig, because no, I've got to get my sword in there somehow, because it just kind of felt like that's what he was doing, especially with that end thing. I think that he also kind of realized Lennox did screw over Lucy. He left her pregnant. He's the reason she was pregnant. He also abandoned her by walking away. And of course she wasn't going to tell him anyway, because she's a married woman. So she's going to play off like it's her husband's, not her lover's. But I think in that moment too, Lennox kind of realized that he also screwed up. And you could see it when he realized that he was Leo's father in that moment. That, and again, credit to Tom Weston Jones here, because the look in his eyes when he realized that he was Leo's father, it was complete stunning revelation. And there was fear there, and there was awe there, and there was so many other things going on there. So I think that he was not going to take the rap for that. So he had to get that dig in. So it's like he started off being honest and truthful, and it just morphed into a dig, because he couldn't leave Colburn unscathed, because I think he was so angry at him.
Well, and also the fact that he didn't say, I gave her the comfort that you didn't. He said you couldn't. And that's already how he feels, like he's not capable of things, you know, especially of comfort, of love, of intimacy. And he's carrying so much guilt around that, you know, it's going to take a while for him to get over it in this next series, I believe. Now, it's interesting, on International Movie Database, it shows Tom Weston Jones as being in the first episode of the 3rd season.
Oh,
which I don't know if that's accurate or not, because I don't know. I think I think it's pretty open source, like Wikipedia, like
Yeah.
anybody could put stuff in there. So I don't know how accurate it is. And I haven't looked to see how many other people are even listed in the third season yet. But
That would be
how many of
interesting,
the other
though.
actors? Yeah. Yeah,
I
we
wonder
need it to
how.
come out.
I'm very curious about that because there's a lot of different ways that they could have him off on that first episode. There's a lot of different avenues that could take, especially with Colburn leaving his estate. We don't know. We assume he's going to London, but we're not really sure. And with the military leaving Sanditon and not having another encampment yet, maybe they went to London too. So there's a lot of different ways that could work.
And it's also possible that he'll appear just in a recall, you know, like somebody's recalling history.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
You don't know.
Maybe we'll see a flashback to when Lucy and Colburn and him were all alive. Ooh, maybe we'd see Lucy. That'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, I'll be surprised if that's what happens.
I don't think,
you never know,
because that's not really how they operate. They don't really go back and do these scenes. They haven't so far. So
I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they do.
So I think my conclusion of Lennox is that he is not a wholly bad character. He has great potential to be redeemed. He has great potential to be someone better than he is, but I don't think he wants to be. I think he's set in his ways, and I think that he is a very self-serving person. It's all about advantage to him, and I think that's by choice.
Well, I think that we saw enough of how good he could be with Charlotte that it's possible if he had found someone who cared for him and cared for him. He's at a point in his life he could do that, marry someone, keep an estate. You know, I think that could happen, but they'd have to be really independent like Charlotte is.
But I think the goodness that we see with him and Charlotte, it was a strategy. It wasn't really who he was, because when we see at the end result of that on the balcony top, when he's like, stop playing games with me. You want what I'm telling you want. Well, that's more what he is inclined to do.
Well, it's because she rejected him.
Well, yeah, but I think he still kind of assumed that she was playing a game, that there's no way she's rejecting me, that this is just, it's almost like a callback to Pride and Prejudice with Collins of, I know it is the plight of elegant females to, like, no, that's not what's happening. So I think that he couldn't believe, after all the work he put in, after all the strategizing, after all the games that he played, there's no way she's not going to want to go with him. There's no way. So this is a ploy. And so I think that is more who he really is. I think that charming was just strategy.
Yeah. I mean, let's face it, none of us are one simple way or the other.
Yeah.
He certainly, even in his villainous, he's not as big a villain as Edward.
I don't even think he's a villain. I think he's just a self-serving guy. I think it was born out of, that's what he chose to be, but I think it was also born out of the amount of time he spent in the military, and he's had to be that way. But I think he likes himself. I don't think he has any desire to change.
No, but Edward likes himself too.
Well, yeah, but Edward is a narcissist.
Well, that's very, very true. I would agree with that distinction.
I don't think Lennox is, though. I think Lennox is just, because you see those moments like with Leo. You see, and I think the moment with Leo, more than anything else that we've seen of Lennox, shows what he is capable of becoming. And but he does keep those men alive on the battlefield. He makes sure that he safeguards his men on the battlefield. It's just once they're off the battlefield, he kind of forgets that, hey, I still have to protect them. So I mean, there's glimpses of what he could become, but I don't think he has any desire to change. So I don't think he will. I wouldn't call him villainous. I wouldn't even call him evil. I would just call him selfish. Very self-serving.
Well, he doesn't have sufficient motivation to change.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good point. I'd say that. And the great thing about this too is that because we aren't given the background and because we aren't given the future, we can have whatever opinions we want about these characters. Because
they are just characters.
Exactly.
But like
their beginning and end story is all in our own heads.
That's right. And like we've said about all this cast, he's an amazing actor. And I really look forward to see him in some more stuff. I know I think they're filming The Shadow and the Bone and Shadow, or I can never remember the name of that show. right now. So it'll be interesting to see him in it again.
I don't know what that is.
It's a relatively new series that came out. I think they had filmed right before the pandemic, and then it came out in 21.
Okay.
Shadow and the Bone. It's strange. It's a strange show. It's a strange show.
Well, I think that he does do it, because the other thing about him too is that every time he was on screen, I didn't like his character. He was no Colburn for me. Obviously, he was no Colburn. But as much as I knew that I was not going to like his character and I was not going to like him with Charlotte, I loved seeing him on screen. And I think he was even better than Edward was in season 1. Not better acting, but I think the character of Lennox was more likable than Edward in season 1. Edward was funny and he brought that sarcasm and that wit, but Lennox seemed like a mostly likable character until he was concerned about himself. So I enjoyed seeing him on the screen. And I'm kind of sad we aren't going to get more of him, but that's what Tom Weston Jones brought to it.
And what amazing differences in how just what he could do with his face to make himself look really soft or really hard, or, I mean, he is really, and it's interesting to me too, that he said when they were shooting the scene where Charlotte and Colburn are dancing and he's in the background looking at them and he's supposed to be jealous. He said, all I could think was, what a beautiful dance this is. What a great job they're doing. So, and
it's like his eyes too. He can say so much with his eyes. That's one of the reasons I keep talking about that scene with Leo, is because the look in his eyes when he saw that, it was just like, how do you do that? It's not, it's different if someone is actually feeling that emotion because it's actually happening. They're actually in that moment. But for an actor to not really have those feelings, but put those feelings into their face and into their eye, like that's impressive. Good job. Well done.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to mention, which is not Tom Weston Jones, but we mentioned before that Mark Stanley was on Henry VIII, right? That was the show that he did instead of coming back to Sanditon. Matthew Needham was in House of the Dragon.
He is in it right now.
Yeah.
It's in the process of coming out. Yep.
So I like to tell you guys when there's some things that the actors who, especially the ones who didn't come back, what they've been working on. Theo James obviously was Time Traveler's Wife, which I heard that got canceled.
It only got the one season.
Yeah, but he was in that, and that's what he did in the interim here. So check out those movies.
I don't know where they could have gone with that series anyway.
It would just be like the same thing over and over and over and over again. I think it's better movie form than series form, but that's just me. I didn't watch any of that, but so I think that's pretty much I think we've dug into Lennox pretty deeply. We spent almost an hour talking about him. So next week we are going to be talking Annie Reed, or not Annie Reed. We're going to be talking about Lady Denham. We'll throw some Annie Reed in there too, I'm sure. But we're going to talk about her relationships with the other people in town and what she is in season 2 and how she changed and that sort of thing, and our opinions on that. So stay tuned for that. Check out our Facebook group, the Sanditon Chronicles, Sanditon Family Fan Club, and we'll see you next week. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Are you craving more TSC content? Head on over to our social media accounts. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and our Facebook group, the Sanditon Chronicles, Sanditon Family Fan Club. Also, check out our website, thesanditonchronicles.com. Of course, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you want to hear and what your thoughts are. Email us at the.sanditonchronicles@gmail.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tune in every week for new episodes.